Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to another astrology video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Mars retrograde phase, which is definitely going to be an unpredictable period of time. So, hopefully, I can share some unique ideas about Mars retrograde here. The fact is that Mars retrograde is such a unique phase compared to all of the other planets. And so I want to break a little bit of that down, otherwise known as the synodic cycle. And the intention of that is to help you prepare and also see that this is part of a bigger picture of what Mars does every 2 years. Before I get there, though, I do have an upcoming webinar on the astrology of 2025 happening Friday here in Australia. And if you're in the USA, it's going to be on Thursday evening. It's called Exploring 2025, and we're going to be looking at all the big transits of the year coming up and what it's going to mean to have planets move into new signs and then back into their former positions. That's Saturn moving across Pisces and Aries, Uranus doing that to Taurus and Gemini, and Neptune moving through Pisces and Aries. We're getting a big preview in 2025 about what the next decade plus is going to mean. And so that's what I'm going to do in this webinar, is trying to break that down and give you a sense of what we're going to be moving to collectively and personally through this very unique astrological situation that we've got going on, having all of the outer planets almost simultaneously moving into different signs and all forming trines and sextiles to each other. So it's a very, very unique pattern that's forming. I'll leave a link to get more information and sign up for that webinar. And of course, whether you can attend it or not, everyone will get a copy of the recording. So, speaking of unique patterns, we also get that with the Mars retrograde cycle. So, let's break down some of the details of what we're moving into in just a couple of days' time. So, Mars is going to station retrograde December 6th at 6 degrees of Leo. It's going to spend December moving backwards through the sign of Leo, and then come January 7, Mars will then cross over into Cancer and go from 29 Cancer through until 17 Cancer and station direct February 24. So that's the retrograde phase. Then, of course, Mars will move through the rest of its Cancer phase until about April 17, and then it won't be until June until we finally see Mars finally enter Leo, and we get back to the regular programming for Mars. So this is a very unique, very rare, and a very lengthy Mars in Leo Cancer combination. So just an idea, just to sort of give you a little bit of an encapsulation or something to put in your pocket, how to think about this Mars retrograde cycle. We've got the lesser malefic planet, a planet that has extreme heat, extreme dryness, moving through the signs of the lights for a long time. And what might that mean for situations that involve identity, that sort of singular point of vision, and what it also might mean for comfort, for safety, security. Those are going to be some themes that we're collectively going to be exploring, and personally too, potentially with this Mars retrograde phase. So, in some ways, having Mars, the disruptive, separative, aggressive, agitating qualities, just irritating, moving through the signs of the sun and the moon, to me almost feels like a pseudo eclipse vibe, an extended eclipse feeling as Mars does this. Also, as an additional point on that, is that we also have the nodes will change signs on January 12th, just not even a week prior to, not even a week after Mars moves into Cancer. So Mars will move into Cancer on the 7th. The nodes change signs on the 12th. So to me, that feels very eclipsy, if you like. And that's what eclipses also do. They are disruptive, they're changes in the regular patterns, and Mars retrograde is that as well. Particularly that Mars is spending the bulk of this retrograde phase in the sign of the moon in Cancer. It could definitely have that effect. So that's just something to keep that in mind. So there's really nothing about the energy of Mars that is peace, love, and kumbaya. It just doesn't happen. It is a troublemaker. It's a disruptor, a separator, an aggressor, and sort of a warrior as well. And that warrior could be righteous, and that warrior can be less than that too. So to sort of position ourselves in this retrograde phase, we got to go back to the start of the cycle. So Mars started this cycle back in November of 2023. I think from memory it was November 24, where Mars made its superior conjunction with the Sun at 21 degrees of Scorpio. So if you've got planets or points at 21 degrees of Scorpio, then this is where this new moon of Mars took place. So it's like every planet will have its new moon with the sun, depending on its own cycles. Mars has it with the sun just once every 2 years. So that's definitely different to all of the other planetary energies, planetary planets that we've got. So think about the house topic of Scorpio for you. Think about if you've got angles or points at 21 or very close to Scorpio, and what changed for you then? What got seeded, proverbially speaking? This position of Mars in its synodic cycle is a little bit like the energy of a freshly minted soldier, that buzz cut or the crew cut, as we call it here in Australia, face shaven with an inch of its life, crisp uniforms, all of that sort of thing. Think of your army movie and your character in that, and that's your guy. So that's Mars, very potent, powerful, and intense, and resourced in the sign of Scorpio. But remember, just as Mars makes its new moon, its conjunction with the sun, it's then rendered invisible. And so it's almost like this ninja, warrior, hidden influence where the opposition to Uranus, which happened at this conjunction with the sun, so Mars and the sun form their conjunction of opposite Uranus. Think about maybe since October, November-ish in your life, how you may have changed course, changed teams, switched things up, done something different. And it may not have come easy because we're talking about fixed sign energies as well. So Mars then just continued on its merry way. And then the next big thing in its cycle was, just trying to remember here, the beginning of the year. So as 2024 began, Mars moved into Capricorn, and it was enough distance from the sun, about 15 degrees, to render itself visible. So we had this hidden scorpionic Mars being renewed, and then it came and rose as a morning star, exalted in the sign of Capricorn. So we had very potent, very powerful start to this particular cycle of Mars. But that's pretty unique. But really, what we're looking for with this synodic cycles is hard angles to its original position. So what we had in February was that Mars moved into Aquarius. And so Mars moved into Aquarius, and just trying to think of my notes here. So I've got 1,000 notes to share with you. It moved into Aquarius, that's right, and it conjoined Pluto. How could I forget? At 0 degrees. Funnily enough, that is the position where Pluto is right now. So that's just a little something to think about, is what happened to you in February or March? How did this 0 degree of Aquarius point, which has been so significant this decade, How did that get reignited again? How were you reminded of that again? Now, to give you a little bit of a heads up, that was when those spy balloons, whatever they were, those hot air balloons that were infiltrating the US at that particular time. I just found it interesting that this cycle started under Scorpio and Uranus, and then that sort of sudden out of the blue, how did this even happen? But something to do with space and not your usual methods of warfare, if you like, whatever that thing was. I don't even know now. And then, funnily enough, too, Uranus and Neptune had its moons discovered. So, really interesting that we're kind of getting into the weird, the galactic, the out of this world themes as the first opening square or the hard angle taking place with Mars in this synodic cycle happened. So, it started with an opposition to Uranus. The first square was a conjunction to Pluto. By the time we get to June and Mars is in Taurus, its next fixed sign, it conjoins Uranus. So we're in that full moon position from where this cycle started. And as it made its conjunction to Uranus, which was also on Algol, um, what was he then? The former president, now president-elect, was shot. Incredible stuff. So think about the whole June, July experience in your life and around the 26 degrees of Taurus, and how did Mars aggravate all of that? So now we've kind of got a bit of a backstory as to how things were shaping up for you since October, November of last year. Now we get to the retrograde phase. And so the retrograde phase is super interesting because what we have with Mars retrograde is Mars super bright, super close, and it makes it more powerful, more out of control. And if you go out into the night sky when Mars is retrograde, we've got this Mars rising, and it spends its entire time in the night sky with this sort of ominous red bright star. And it's opposite to the sun. So as the sun is setting, Mars is rising. And so this is a really interesting phenomena because we've got the sun and the point of identity, that conscious direction. Who am I? Where am I going? All of those kind of things. But then on the other side of the sun, we've got Mars, who's a renegade, a maverick, and out of control at the best of times, retrograde, berserker. And that's the idea of Mars when it's retrograde, is a little bit like the berserker. So in ancient Scandinavia, when the Vikings needed backup, they called in their berserkers. And so these were these giant guys who were so overpowered. They were they could just take out the enemies in one go. So yeah, we still got the archetype of the berserker and another archetype, I think, with Mars retrograde. And I think this will be very apt for Mars retrograde in Cancer, is the toddler past its bedtime. Doesn't know its strength, doesn't even know how out of control it is, wants to party all night, but it really just needs to go to bed. So that's something to sort of think about as Mars retrogrades, particularly through Cancer. And so when we think about Mars, Mars is that red planet. It is different to all of the other planets. It doesn't have regular retrograde periods like like Mercury, like Venus. It doesn't conjoin the sun once a year from Jupiter out. All the other planets do that. So the opposition to the sun sees it super bright, super close, but super charged to the point that it's almost out of control. The rules don't apply to Saturn. So we have Saturn, order, structure, all of those kind of things. But then Mars can sometimes be that chink in the armor, that break in the chain, particularly when retrograde. And it's not as though Mars gets weakened when it's retrograde, because a lot of people will think that. It's more that it's just so supercharged, so out of control, so almost white ragey. You know, when you get to that point where you're so angry, you almost have this out of body experience. It's almost as though you've gone berserk. So there is sort of um, that lack of procedure that Mars would normally follow. It doesn't apply. And so when Mars does retrograde, that's how life can feel. It feels out of control. It feels unpredictable. You're not working on your regular schedules. So, as an example, there might be a day, and I had this, I felt this really strongly when Mars was retrograding last time in Gemini in my first house. There would be days where I was thinking, retrograde? What retrograde? I'm powering through everything. Um, Everything's fine. And I'd just get so much done. It was like I'd had 10 cups of coffee. But then the next day, I'd feel like I was hit by a bus and couldn't do anything. So that's a really big tip for working with Mars retrograde in real time. If you've got the energy, if you're going berserker, if you're that overpowered toddler, go and do all the things, tick off all the to-do list, just make hay, so to speak, because the following day, you may not feel that you can replicate that pattern. And funnily enough, I read some research a long time ago that in terms of being able to maintain energy, your output has to be equal to the input. So basically, the idea was don't do more than what you can afford to recover from. So, say for example, I did a workshop last weekend. It went really well. It was great, but I didn't account for how much it smashed me energetically. And it took Sunday was a write-off, Monday was a little bit shaky, Tuesday I was back to normal. And that was almost a symptom or a symbol of that Mars retrograde. Um, it was a day of full on output and then of course drinks after. But then it took another full day plus a little bit extra to recover from that. Now that energy gets really potent during Mars retrograde. So energy management becomes a big important piece of the energy. So far in this synodic cycle, we've got that newly minted soldier straight out of army school. I don't know the better name for it. It's army school. So it's newly minted, sharp, ready for battle. And then it hits that Aquarius point. It hit the full moon, the Taurus point, and now it's going into that retrograde cycle, which usually happens once it gets past that opposition point, usually around sort of 40 to 50 degrees past that. And so that's where we are now, and Mars is going to back up and it's going to change. And so probably the key points to think about when Mars retrogrades is your energy management. Also, particularly once we get into Cancer, is emotional management. So it might be not to invest too much pride or personal ego into something once we have the cycle through Leo, because it will cost you a lot emotionally through Cancer. It's one way to consider it. Now, of course, there is going to be work to be done with Mars in Cancer. Mars is considered in fall in Cancer. So on paper, it is the worst version of Mars that we have. I've done a video on working with the worst planet in quotation marks in astrology to give you perhaps a little bit of a deeper perspective of the benefits of Mars in Cancer. They may not look good on paper, but there's definitely benefits astrologically, even to the bad stuff. So well, I won't say don't, but avoid falling into the trap of Mars is in full, it's retrograde, oh my God, everything's ruined. It's not. So do check out that video. I'll put a link in the bottom section for you so you can check that out. So there's definitely going to be work to be done with this transit for sure. Now, if you can do the work, if you can fall down like Mars is, but not let that perhaps emotionally ruin you, then there's going to be benefits and blessings when Jupiter comes in. So do cast your mind back to what you started or what you seeded October, November of last year. What challenges did you have to face maybe around February, March? maybe again June, July, and now we're in the retrograde phase. It is that opposition phase between the sun and the action planet of Mars. And so this is this vying for dominance, this battle of energies between the identity and the self and the actions required or that need to be taken to actualize that. So it's this idea of, are you doing on the daily the actions that is required to support whatever goals, plans, events that are important to you? It may be really important to look at your Cancer Capricorn axis. It's almost like the post Pluto and Capricorn wrap up or tidy up phase. You could also see it like that. What emotionally blocks you, Mars in Cancer, what emotions, what past pain or past trauma or childhood stuff, family stuff. What is the itchy, scratchy stuff within you that is blocking you? What do you need to cut, sever, burn, separate yourself from so you can come back to the sun and conjoin it when the next seeding cycle begins? FYI, that'll be January 2026. And I think it happens at not at 19 Capricorn, about the 9th of January, conjoin Venus opposite Jupiter. So that's a very exciting one, a very different one to the one that we're in now. These Mars synodic cycles really do start at the seeding point, 21 Scorpio. So what have you been holding on to? What have you been letting get toxic within you? Or what's the vitriol or the venom that you're holding on to that's holding you back? And Mars in Cancer, you've just got to decide whatever the circle of trust is in your life in terms of meet the parents and just get that on the outer. So there's a few ideas for you in how this synodic cycle works. Think about these significant points in that cycle. Reflect on your chart, reflect on events around that time. And what is it from particularly an emotional, a security perspective, a survival perspective, family, nurturing, mothering, children, caring, all of those type of Cancerian archetypes. What do you maybe need to defend, protect? All of that sort of stuff is likely to come up. Most significantly not until January, but it's something to think about as this retrograde phase starts at 6 degrees of Leo, which is also a fixed sign. So there is a little bit of an itchy, scratchy point, and really to heal and to do this Mars in Cancer work, sometimes we have to let go of a bit of ego, a little bit of pride, a little bit of self-interest, let things go so we can be opened up and do the work, as they say. If you can do this, I promise you there'll be benefits and blessings once Jupiter in Cancer arrives. So do meditate the next couple of days. Think about your Cancer house. What house is it? Are there any planets that live there? And where is the moon in your birth chart? And that's going to give you a little bit further insight as to what this Mars retrograde in Cancer might mean for you. It's a very juicy transit. I could talk about this one for a really long time, but I'm going to stop now. There'll be more to come, and I'd really look forward to your comments and feedback in the comments section below. It's December now, it's close to the end of the year, and I'd love to get 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2024. So I could start 2025 on 5,000. So there we have it. So if you've liked the video, if you found it useful, a fresh way to think about Mars retrograde, do like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate that a lot. And I'll put a link below to Friday's webinar. So until next time, I hope you have a gentle entry into this Mars retrograde phase.